Hi, I'm Lisa Fisher, and today myself and Brandon Armstrong are going to talk about PFOS as it relates to fish and surface water from Lake Superior and its tributaries. Although Brandon and I work for different state agencies, we work together on PFAS issues involving surface water and fish through the Michigan PFAS Action Response Team, which is a collaboration of the state agencies to share information and resources and to work together on any issues involving PFAS. So I'm a toxicologist who works for the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, or DHHS, and I'm involved in the Michigan Fish and Wild Game Consumption Advisory Program. Specifically, I work on the Eat Safe Fish program, which is the DHHS side of the Michigan Fish Consumption Advisory Program. The Eat Safe Fish program also covers wild game, but for the purposes of this talk, I'm just going to talk about fish. To provide some context about how people can be exposed to PFAS, fish consumption is only one pathway. Drinking contaminated water is the major pathway of concern since we all drink water every day. Accidentally swallowing contaminated dirt or dust is another exposure pathway, along with eating foods packaged in PFAS-containing materials, as well as the use of consumer products that are grease-proof or water-resistant or water-repellent. PFAS absorption through the skin is typically not a concern. We are mainly concerned about exposure via ingestion. We have the most knowledge of human health effects associated with PFOA and PFOS exposure, which are two types of PFAS, and they include some of the following health effects listed here. And here are some other associated health outcomes with PFOA and or PFOS exposure. And it's important to note that exposure to PFOA and PFOS at elevated levels doesn't mean that someone will develop these health outcomes, since there are many factors that can contribute to developing these health conditions. So moving into the Michigan Fish Consumption Advisory Program, the Fish and Wildlife Consumption Advisory Committee is comprised of 4 state agencies that all play different roles but come together in different capacities when it comes to evaluating fish data. The Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, also known as EGLE, manages environmental protection programs intended to reduce or eliminate contaminant loads to the environment. Then they also sample fish and wildlife for consumption purposes as well as ecological health purposes. The Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development assures the safety of commercially sold or raised fish and wildlife and samples fish and wildlife meant for commerce. The Michigan Department of Natural Resources manages wildlife and commercial and recreational fisheries, and they also sample fish and wildlife for various reasons. MDHHS evaluates fish and wildlife data to determine if consumption guidelines are needed to protect public health. One of the main goals of the Eat Safe Fish program is to provide information on the health benefits and risks of fish consumption to consumers. We provide our fish consumption guidelines in booklets known as the Eat Safe Fish Guides that are available on our website. We also include summary statistics of the data used to develop or update the fish consumption guidelines. We use risk assessment methods from the EPA and ATSDR, or Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry, which is consistent with what other states use when developing fish consumption screening values. And as new data becomes available in the peer-reviewed literature, we think about how that may change the fish consumption screening values that we are currently using. This is especially true with PFAS, as a lot of work is going on right now, and we want to make sure that our fish consumption screening values are relevant with the emerging science. We're also a part of the Great Lakes Consortium for Fish Consumption Advisories, which is a collaboration of all the Great Lakes states' fish consumption program managers. So to speak specifically about PFOS, these are the fish consumption screening values that Michigan currently uses. And PFOS is the most common PFAS found in fish from Michigan, and it's the PFAS of most concern in fish given its bioaccumulation factor. Our guidelines for PFOS for fish consumption purposes would start when the 95% upper confidence limit for a particular species from a water body exceeds 9 parts per billion. Once the 95% UCL exceeds 300 parts per billion, we would issue a do not eat advisory, either for a specific species from a water body or the entire water body, depending on what other fish data we have and where the source of PFAS is coming from. These are the fish consumption guidelines specific for fish from Lake Superior. We also have statewide guidelines available online for any species not listed here. Legacy contaminants are still an issue for Lake Superior fish, with PCBs, mercury, toxaphene, and/or dioxins being the contaminants driving the fish consumption guidelines. Under the Michigan servings per month column, the 2x means that you can double the servings if the fish are cleaned and cooked so that fat is removed or can drip away. This advice doesn't apply to guidelines where mercury or PFOS are the chemicals of concern, since those contaminants don't store in fat like PCBs, dioxins, and toxaphene. The limited servings category means that sensitive populations shouldn't eat these fish. The sensitive populations include pregnant or breastfeeding women, women who plan on having children in the next several years, children under the age of 15, and people with health conditions such as cancer or diabetes. People who don't fall under a sensitive population can eat 1 to 2 meals per year if the recommendation is limited. MDHHS currently has a precautionary advisory for smelt based on data collected from the Wisconsin DNR. So the state agencies from Michigan, along with our federal and tribal partners, collected smelt last year from Lake Superior and saw similar results. So we're currently keeping the guideline of 1 serving per month of smelt from Lake Superior in place. Currently, smelt are the only fish consumption guideline for Lake Superior where PFOS is the contaminant driving the guideline.